Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to him, the blessed one, the worthy one, the fully enlightened one. My utmost respect to the perfectly enlightened Sammasambuddha, the noble doctrine of the Buddha, and the noble Mahasangha, the disciples of the Buddha. Hello, dear Dhamma friends. Welcome to week 14 guest lecture series. Under this weekly guest lecture series, we will cover up more current topic and modern topic related to Buddhism to help benefit our community around the world. I certainly believe this effort by Dhamma USA is going to help the community to apply Buddhist teaching in a more practical level. Please mark your calendar every Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to attend this guest lecture series. Kindly check with Dhamma USA YouTube channel, Facebook page, and Facebook groups for more updates. Today's topic is titled How to Benefit from Buddhism and Psychology, brought to us all by Mr. Sailesh Maharjan. Mr. Sai has earned a bachelor degree in Buddhism and Pali Studies and one in psychology from University of Bernadino. He has also earned a master's degree in clinical psychology and currently a doctoral student at California State University San Bernardino. He is experienced in mindfulness, meditation, and delivers talk on Buddhist philosophy focused on applying Buddhism in everyday life. Mr. Sai was a Theravada Buddhist monk for 16 years. He spent 12 years in Sri Lanka. In 2012, he came to the United States as a religious worker to serve at Sambuddha Loka Buddhist Vihara in Moreno Valley, California. He traveled across California, Nevada, Texas, Arizona, Chicago, and Virginia as a spiritual guide and Buddhist speaker for several years before pursuing his master's degree in clinical psychology. For more of his short background, please visit our website at dhammausa.org. Welcome, Mr. Sai. Good evening to you. How are you doing?
Hello, Sylvia. I thought I was mute for a moment. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I think I've seen you before at Dhamma Chakrata.
Oh, that's the phrase. I was trying to remember.
Yeah, my whole family
Okay.
is a part of Dhamma Chakrata in Los Angeles.
Okay. So
Mhm.
you yes. Yeah, yeah. Nice to meet you
Yes.
again.
um, Dhamma friends, let us start today's session. Please kindly post your questions in the comment section of Dhamma USA YouTube channel or Facebook page so that our guest lecturer can answer them at the end of the talk. Without further ado, Mr. Sai, I will let you start your presentation.
Thank you, Sylvia. Um, Good evening, everyone. We're in California time, so it's 6 p.m. here. Thank you, Bante Sumita, for having me on this wonderful platform to talk about, to share some Buddhist ideas and also maybe some psychological ideas that would help to benefit our everyday life. Um, I don't have a PowerPoint slides because I thought it's a very interesting topic to discuss and um, thinking about the Buddha's teaching in the 21st century. I like to reflect, how long we have passed since the Buddha passed away. It's been a really long time. However, the teaching of the Buddha is still applicable. If you look at the human conditions, what Buddha spoke about human condition has not changed. It has been consistent from that time to now. So in the 21st century, we are overwhelmed by so much information. And uh, if you think of religions, not just Buddhism, but also any other religion, they all try to bring us some kind of consolation. They all try to give us some advice about life to improve from certain level to advance to a better state, and they all have something great to teach us. Now, as a former Buddhist monk and also a current follower of the Buddha, and I see a lot of useful teachings from the Buddha's life and also his Dhamma. So in 21st century, we tend to think that, since it has passed such a long time, we have tendency to forget the connection between the teaching and the contemporary needs. Now, if you look at human life, we all go through what Buddha called dukkha satya. Now, this is from the very basic, very fundamental teaching of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths. There, the very first one is about dukkha satya, the truth of dissatisfaction. Now, there's a loose translation when you say dissatisfaction. It has negative connotation, and perhaps that's why many Western and even some Eastern scholars, Buddhist and non-Buddhist scholars, tend to critique, not just criticize, but critique Buddha's teaching has more emphasis on pessimism, and they emphasize more about the first noble truth. And maybe that has been a challenge for newcomers and people, those who want to learn about Buddhism. It's a very pessimistic teaching, so how can I benefit from that? Well, before we judge the book by its cover, it's worth taking a look into what is in that truth, right? So the truth is here, why it is called the truth of dissatisfaction, or the truth, the dukkha satya, is because what Buddha tells us is not just about pain or discomfort. It is about the nature uh, of life. Now, when you look into suttas and Pali suttas, the elaboration goes on saying that jati pi dukkha, jara pi dukkha, maranam pi dukkham. Vyadhi dukkho marnam dukkham, it goes on telling us the nature of life, which is birth, aging, sickness, and death. They tend to be dissatisfaction. Now, if you pause there, and dissatisfaction has to do with it changes. The reason it is dissatisfaction or not contentment, we cannot find contentment, is because it's changing. Why it changes? Because it's conditional. Now, anything that is conditioned in this world is subject to change. And when things change, yada nityam tang dukkham. If there is change in any kind of phenomenon, that is subject to be dissatisfying. Now, if you look at little further in that explanation, you will see api sampoyogo dukkho. Now, if I normally like to engage in a sort of a conversation when I talk about Buddha's teaching, but it seems like you're welcome to put your comment on chat or question on chat. That makes it a little more interactive. But the next part of this dukkha satya is like not receiving or not achieving what you wish for is a form of dissatisfaction. Now, how often we can deny that fact? When you don't get what you want, in a very plainest language, that could lead to dissatisfaction. And apiyehi sampayogo dukkho, being with someone disliked could cause dissatisfaction. Piyehi vipayogo dukkho, separating or being apart from a beloved one could lead to dissatisfaction. And yampi changalap dukkha, not getting what you wish for could be dissatisfying. Now, when you look at in that form, the dukkha, the term dukkha, or in English translation, dissatisfaction or sometimes suffering, those are not related to what we see in the general use. It's talking about beyond, it's talking about in terms of life. So that truth has been continued to criticized and also loosely understood. So when you try to read more, and again, the Buddha's teaching is more about reflective. It is a reflective teaching. When you reflect about these facts, look at your own life, you start realizing, oh, there is some truth in it. Now, seeing that a temporary or a momentary truth is a great start. And once you go beyond, then you start looking at it in that Four Noble Truths. The first one is dukkha satya, which is supposed to be comprehended with your experience. And the second truth is samudaya satya, or the cause of dukkha, or cause of dissatisfaction. And Buddha shows that it's the attachment, it's the clinging, it's the grasping of materialistic and sensual pleasure that leads to dissatisfaction. And when you look at that part, you realize that, okay, now the reason we go through some sadness, depression, anxiety is because we have trouble separating ourselves from this material and immaterial belongings in the world, right? So that is the cause, the attachment, and the desire to have more, desire to live longer, desire to be in the same position for the longest time. No matter how much we wish for, it doesn't stay that same way. Now, the third truth tells us, well, if you know the cause, then you should know the remedy, and that is the nibbana, the nirodha satya. Nibbana is another term in Buddhism that is constantly misunderstood. It is not a place to be, it is not a place to go. It's a state of mind. In the Abhidhamma, the teaching of analytical Buddhist psychology or analytical teaching, or deeper Dhamma, in Abhidhamma, you find that there are 8 types of consciousness that is related to enlightenment. And those are Sotapanna Chitta, Sotapanna Phala, Sakadagami Chitta, Sakadagami Phala, and Anagami and Arhanta Chitta and Phala. So those are, if you look at it, it is actually a consciousness. It's a type of consciousness that arises based on necessary condition. So it's a irreversible consciousness that change your personality. Now that Nibbana is, again, it's something that you purify, you practice through meditation, through reflection, through observation. There are many ways to achieve that, and it's a state of mind. It's not a place to be. It's not about eternal happiness. Well, the absence of dukkha, that's what the nibbana means. This absence of all type of dissatisfaction is a state of mind, what we call nibbana. And the fourth one is, of course, the path, the magga satya. Now, that is, starting from the right understanding all the way to right concentration. I'm sure you have sometime read about it, you have seen this. The problem is what is misunderstood, and what we can learn to better our life is all of these teachings, the Four Noble Truths, they are not supposed to be understood. Each truth has its own role. The first, the Dukkha Satya, the teaching of truth of dissatisfaction, supposed to be comprehended. The second one, Samudaya Satya, should be eradicated or destroyed because it's the root of your dissatisfaction. And the third one is achieved, attained. And the fourth one, the path or the Eight Noble Path, should be followed or cultivated. So each one has its own role. Now, why did I go over these Four Noble Truths? Because to me, it's that the way we talk, the language, the way we use in every day could impact how we see things, right? And when we don't know exact meaning and exact terms related to the Dhamma, that could mislead. That's why I thought it would be important that we think about these paths in a little detail. Now, the other important part, Buddhism in 21st century, is that I chose this topic, Buddhism and psychology, because to me, the Buddha, even he was around 2600 years back, his approach was very similar to what I have seen in psychology. In fact, when I was in Sri Lanka, I started going to University of Bernadino, and I had the opportunity to choose different subjects. And as a monk, I looked into different subjects, and they were all interesting. And I found psychology is the closest subject matter that touch the Buddha's teaching, because if you look at Buddhism beyond rituals, rites and rituals, you will notice that Buddhism has a lot of teaching about how mind works and how mind can get polluted, how can you purify your mind. Now, being a psychology student and also instructor, I have seen that that simple misunderstanding, misperception about the world can lead to a lot of trouble. So just to ask another important question here, Buddha as a scientist or psychologist. Now, how can we compare? Why can we benefit from Buddhism and psychology? Because Buddha has similar to what we do in psychology approaches in his teaching. Now, number one is that Buddha used empirical data. Now, there is no magic in Buddhism. Of course, there are stories. Now, we can debate about it in a different time, but most of the valuable, most of the important teachings in Buddhism, which is to attain enlightenment or to free yourself from dissatisfaction, has to do with your experience. And Buddha used that empirical data. And even himself, before he started his journey as a Buddhist missionary, or to start teaching Buddhism to other individuals, his very first reflection was Sayang Abhijñā Satchikatva. I have seen myself, I have achieved myself. That's where he realized, and he tried to teach other people. So he used empirical data. And sometimes people try to attribute, your sadness, your happiness, your depression, your anxiety has to do with someone else. And Buddha was very clear about those concepts. He used, so when people were looking for answers to your life's problems, Buddha asked to direct yourself to yourself, inward. The other term is that, when people look for the cause of dukkha outside of themselves, Buddha directed them, all the dissatisfaction, the cause, the freedom, and the path is within yourself. And he directed toward your senses. And he used like a Chakkusota, Gana, Jiva, Kaya, and Mana. These are six senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. This is the origin of your dukkha, and you can find solution within those faculties, within those senses. And to me, the Buddha was very empirical person. He did not rely on divine claims. He did not rely on mystical discovery. He was very clear, and you will see that in even his various discourses. He openly invites monks to, you have to ask question. Vivatto virochati. The Buddha's teaching is more illuminative when you ask deep questions. And there are times when people are skeptical about Buddhahood. He would reveal secrets. He would tell all the detail about being a Buddha. So to me, Buddha was a very empirical person, and that's why I see that learning Buddhism and also knowing some psychological theories and psychological principle help us to see, wow, Buddha was pretty much close to a scientist. And he was also very rigorous. He did not promise anything to anyone. And that's what we do. And I am in clinical psychology, and we don't promise any kind of cure just by attending a session. For example, if somebody has depression, attending therapy does not guarantee that you will be you can overcome depression. You have to do some homework. You have to challenge yourself, speak about your experience, share your struggle, apply some of those skills in your everyday life. That's how you can help yourself to get out of depression. In the same way, there's one story that might be a little more contextual here, that when the Buddha was giving a talk one evening, a man came to him and asked that, I'm a busy guy, and I need to learn about the Dhamma, but I don't have time. So can you just tell me where this Nibbana is, where this enlightenment is, and if it's much better if you can take me there. And Buddha smiled and replied to this person, saying that if you ask a direction to a certain place, just giving you direction does not take you to that location. It's just a map. It's just a guidance. The Buddha's job is to give you the path. Your job is to walk on that path. So from that perspective, you see that Buddha was not promising anything because you follow him, or you bow to the Buddha and gain some kind of miracle wisdom. I don't think that is a part of early Buddha's teaching. What he did was he laid out the clear path, and those paths were very rigorous. You have to follow step by step. You have to, number one, there are two ways you can learn Buddhism. Number one, you have to gain knowledge, either from listening, either from reflecting, either from contemplating on Dhamma teachings. So what we do, what this Dhamma USA is doing is giving you that very fundamental step toward learning about Buddhism. So that is how you gain knowledge. Now, knowledge is useless without application. That is where you practice, and that's where you try to translate all your knowledge into wisdom, right? So when you learn about dana or generosity, yes, you can write a thesis, you can do a doctoral dissertation on generosity, but if you have never given a penny, if you have never donated or given anything away, your thesis is intellectual property. It is just a knowledge. It has little application. What makes Buddhism different is that it encourages you to practice. And to me, practicing generosity is a way to train your mind to let go. That's like a very subtle way the Buddha introduced people to Buddhism. If you practice giving and you give with the sense of letting go, you're learning to let go. When you learn to let go material belongings, it will be easier to let go your mental attachment. Like it or not, we all have to move on in our life. We grow older, we lose our family members, we see friends get sick during COVID pandemic. I'm sure some of you have lost your family members, and those moments are harder than just giving away some of your wealth. That's why practicing generosity has to do with learning to let go. And that once you're in that path, the next step the Buddha encourages dana kata sila kata. Try to have some moral conduct. Try to clean your verbal and behavioral activities. Try to train yourself to restrain your faculties. That will help you to improve your journey. And in psychology, we talk about similar principle, right? When somebody is diagnosed with psychological problems, they may have some kind of emotional, behavioral, or cognitive malfunction. They have something, they're biased in certain aspect cognitively. They're engaging in some behavior too much or too little. So too much could be using substance or using drug. That could be too much, or too little could be as simple as practicing good hygiene. And emotional could be you have this strong attachment or detachment toward the actual happenings in your life. So any of those disturbances can lead to psychological problems, and that's what we see in Buddhism as well. He gave us this. Okay, you have to try to apply, like not killing, not stealing, not lying, not engaging in sexual misconduct, and not using alcohol or any kind of substance that intoxicates you. So these 5 principles, and to me, I can talk a lot more on these 5 precepts, because to me those precepts are not just about what you should not do, but also what you should be practicing as well. And if you just look at the 5 precepts, number 1, not to kill, it's not just about refraining from killing. It is also about practicing loving kindness, practicing gentleness, protecting lives, saving lives. That's what makes it complete. And instead of stealing, you practice giving, letting go, and sharing what you have, and helping people, those who are in need. And sexual misconduct could be related to practicing fidelity, being honest to your partner, being reliable to your partner, keeping that promise. And lying could be counter practice by engaging in speaking about truth, telling people what is real, what is fact, and not engaging in gossiping or harsh speaking. The last one, engaging in drinking behavior, could be counterpart or counteracted by practicing meditation, being more mindful. So if you look at these steps, and that's like I started telling about generosity, then leading to practicing sila or morality, and then the next level would be developing your mind, cultivating your mind, trying to, and not like rigorously, like trying to be enlightened overnight. I don't know. You can try, but to me, what's more important is staying in that path is more important rather than trying to do overnight. And to me, that's similar to what I tell my classes, and my students. They are they procrastinate their assignments, their coursework, and they try to do everything in a night or 2. Yes, you can do it. It will be super sloppy. It will be super disorganized. So same thing will apply to when we try to do things within a short time. So practicing learning about Buddhism is a progressive way, progressive approach. You learn principles, you contemplate, you reflect on them, you talk about them, and start to see the use of them in your life. And the other area that I think of Buddha as a scientist is how he used language. You compare to how we use language in psychology, it's very similar or more advanced in the Buddha's case. He chose words that was already in use during his time and coined them to explain very complex ideas. For example, the word present, when you think of the timeline, past, present, and future, he chose a word for the past. Of course, it's a similar word that he used, but for the present in Pali and also in Sanskrit, you would find the term called vartamana or vattamana. That means something that is existing. Now, Buddha did not use that word to make reference to the present. He used patyupanna. Now, his choice of word is very careful. He said that something is arising by the cause. Now, the moment now is the result or the effect of a moment before. So, something that is arising by a cause. That's what patyupanna means. And he used that word to explain the present. Now, when you think of that, he was extremely careful how he chose language. And many other words like Brahmi, that was another term very often used during the Buddha's time. Instead of referring to certain caste system or group, Buddha explained that Brahman is somebody who has given up on all kind of defilements. So Arya, all these terms which has a very different meaning, he was careful to choose them and explain the Buddha's teaching. So to going back, the Buddha's use of language is very careful and meticulous, and you see that in psychology as well. When we do research, when we try to talk about research, we look at how our word can impact how we think, feel, and behave. And one of the my favorite theories that is around now is the acceptance and commitment therapy, which is based on some type of philosophy of language. And they talk about how thinking, just you tell yourself, I am depressed, I am sad, is problematic, because when you say that I am depressed, similar to I am Sailesh, that I own that particular feelings or emotions. So when I say I am depressed, it's instead of separating, depression is a separate part of me that I'm experiencing, I'm identifying with that particular symptoms. So in ACT, we call that cognitive fusion. You identify with the problem, which makes it harder to solve, and you try to get it better. Well, there is a way you can separate, and that another term is diffuse. What you think, what you say does not describe the actual yourself. So depression could be, yes, some type of experience that you go through, but it does not describe everything about you. Now, what I'm trying to tell here is that language could be very useful, and we need to, in science and also in Buddhism, we use them carefully. And Buddha was very careful about the use of language, and he chose those terms. And it's a lesson for us when we talk about Buddhism. Make sure that we use right terms. We refer to things in a correct way. And the other important part is that in science we see that scientific studies are replicable. In psychology, let's say somebody found a way to improve people's anxiety by either exposure therapy, where you try to show people something that could stimulate them anxiety and help them to use some kind of coping skill to reduce the anxiety. And let's say you did that and you helped some people, and if another group of people want to replicate that same study or same experiment, they are able to do it following the protocol. Now, same thing applies to the Buddha's teaching. What he taught us 2,500 years back, 2,600 years back, that is still applicable in today's time. It is replicable. Somebody follows the teaching in a right way, can replicate the fruits and results of those Dhamma, and it's achievable. Now, that's one thing that makes Buddhism unique. Buddha's teaching is not necessarily only for next life, but also for this life. And how can you benefit the practice of Dhamma in this very life? As simple as, some just stories, how a person who was a murderer, once he became a monk, he was able to transform his life. The popular character in Buddhism, Angulimala, and some other individuals like who was a royal servant, he became a monk and he received the royal respect after becoming a monk. So that's like a Ditta Dhamma in Pali. We say that in this very life. So the benefit of practicing Dhamma does not necessarily only applies to next life or life after. It is in this very life. And one interesting fact here, the teaching, I should say, not fact, teaching here is that sometimes we see that people have trouble accepting rebirth. Sometimes people have trouble accepting the function of karma, your action and the consequences. We tend to think of rebirth as we don't know. We cannot do studies, and I have not seen any experiment or any studies that can prove there is rebirth. Now, let me tell you, if you just reject that rebirth is impossible because it is not proven yet, we are being hasty, right? Not proving something does not mean it doesn't exist. For example, there was a time that doctors and other healthcare practitioners, they used to promote how cool it is to smoke cigarette. Now, then they did not know that there are some disadvantages of smoking, and they promoted those products. If you ask them to do now, well, they will give you hundreds of research, maybe not hundreds and hundreds of research on the disadvantage or uh, disadvantage of smoking. Now, that is a type of fallacy we are coming down to. Just because we don't have evidence does not mean it doesn't exist. So here, what you can do is, I'm not trying to sell, you should accept rebirth. Well, it's up to you. If you think it doesn't exist, that is totally fine with me. Why? Buddha was fine with that too. There were people during the Buddha's time who came to him and they blatantly said that, I don't believe in rebirth. And Buddha didn't say that, okay, you don't believe in rebirth, you can be my student. No, what he cared was, well, do you at least believe in this life? That was his answer. This is more, you can find more detail in Kalama Sutta. He asked that, do you believe in this life? Well, of course you do, because you are a person and you are in this life. So Buddha said that if you believe in this life, just look at this life and change what you do, change how you approach to things. That can improve, that can help you to advance and do much better in this very life. So the point here is, like, things that we learn from Buddhism can be practiced in this very life, right? So that's how I see Buddha and his approach. And a few other things that I want to share, is that as a Buddha's student or Buddha's follower, what are a few things we can do in 21st century? Now, if you compare Buddhism to other religion, we don't have a savior God. We don't have a place to go and feel secured, right? We don't have an ultimate goal in terms of our rituals and rites to achieve. It is pretty much, we are on our own in a way. We have Buddha's teaching, mostly we are on our own. So the very important part is, to become a Buddhist, to benefit from Buddha's teaching, we have to be active, not a passive follower. Passive follower could be, I'm more critique about the Buddhist rituals and rites than any other religion, because I have seen a lot. Let's say somebody lights a candle and does not reflect on the value or the meaning of it, would be not so fruitful for that person. To me, that is a very passive follower. You chant Buddha's sutta, you do recitation, and you don't think about the meaning, and you don't try to reflect those meanings in your life. To me, that person is a passive follower. He or she just does what other people say. It's like almost like a blind follower. Why? Because that does not lead you to anywhere near to Nibbana. Now, that's where we need to be. And like Buddha said, atapi, you have to have that urgency. You have to have that effort. So to become an active practitioner, you don't need to give up your lay life, not necessarily, unless you are very determined to progress really fast. And I'll tell you why. The monastic life could be a fast track for enlightenment. But you, as in your position, I'm an instructor, and if you are a business person, if you are any other profession, you can bring Buddhism in your life from very small pieces of teachings. Find a moment to apply. And for example, let's say you have to deal with very difficult people, and those people could trigger anger, frustration, jealousy, hatred, all of those emotions. Those are perfect moment to bring Dhamma in our life. Those are perfect moment to benefit from the Buddha's teaching. That's why, in many Dhamma classes and Dhamma sermons, when monks and lay scholars talk about, they try to tell you, like, I think at the beginning of this talk, Sylvia did a brief reflection on Buddha's qualities. Now, why do we do that? To become an active practitioner, we need reminders. Practicing loving kindness, sitting down for 5 minutes in the morning or in the afternoon, saying that may I be well, happy, and peaceful, may I be free from anger, hatred, and suffering. That is, yes, it's a loving kindness. It also is a reminder. It reminds you that, well, I cannot hate myself. I should not hate myself. That is not uh, what Buddha said. He said, may I be free from hatred. May I be able to do that. May I be free from anger. I should be striving to overcome anger, not to cultivate more. So those are a great reminder for us. And that's why we establish a practice. And if you are from Sri Lanka or any of the Buddhist countries, every ceremony we uh, uh, administer 5 precepts, remind people about 5 precepts. It's not redundancy, it's a reminder. Humans need that. And if we don't repeat certain behavior for at least 2 to 3 weeks time, it won't establish as a habit. So that's what we are trying to do by reminding ourselves, by engaging in any of those rituals, but also being wise, not just following because other people do, or do because we don't know the meaning. Now, and all the Buddhist rituals that we do, chanting has a deep meaning. I'll just keep it simple. Chanting is a way to reflect on Dhamma. Listening to the Pali or reading your own language helps you to reflect about your life, permanence, satisfaction, no selfness, or just as simple as how much we can benefit from practicing loving kindness. All of those are good reflection on Dhamma. We all need that. And offering flower. Now, offering flower is not about beauty. Sometimes it becomes a competition in temples and monasteries because we forgot the actual meaning of offering flower. We offer flower because that resembles impermanence. It is an embodiment of impermanence in flowers. When you offer a flower in the morning, at the evening, it starts to decay. And that change is a reminder of impermanence. And in Pali, we say that Vanagandu, uh, I'm trying to remember now, I'm a little rusty on Pali. So when you think of like offering flower, the flower as it continued to age, it started decay. And the meaning is, I remember the meaning, but not the Pali, it will come to me in a minute, is that as this flower decays, may I be able to reflect on my life, on impermanence. So that's how we become active practitioner. Offering light, we reflect on wisdom. Offering water, we reflect on purity. So every activity we do can have some meaning. And that's how we can become an active practitioner. And I mentioned that lay followers and the monastic followers, they may have 2 different routes, but the journey toward enlightenment is the same. Monks don't have any like shortcuts to achieve enlightenment, nor lay people have extra steps to do to achieve enlightenment. We all have similar challenge, which is our untamed mind. Our untamed mind is the biggest challenge that we try to train it by small steps, by practicing very doable size. And this is where we need some level of confidence. I think that's where Buddhism and psychology maybe sometime we can see them as similar, because in psychology, when we start to develop an intervention or we try to do an experiment, there is some level of faith, some level of unknown factors. Now, as you go on, you use someone else's theory to build better theory. Now, that is a little different than just faith. Now it is a little bit of confidence because someone has already done this before and I'm trying to replicate. I might do it in a different ways, but I'm trying to replicate the result of the previous finding. And same thing applies if you think of the Buddha's teaching. Buddha has gone this journey, achieved the enlightenment, and he gave us the path. We are replicating what he did. Not just him, millions of other Buddha's students who have replicated his method and achieved that goal. And we may not have a lot of people who will brag about their achievement, but there should be. And I don't think it's very accurate to say that there are no enlightenment these days. We don't know. There should be some probably monastic individuals or some lay people who have rigorously practiced meditation and walk through the Dhamma path and achieve those goals. So um, that is still possible and that is replicable. And that's when you think of that, when you think of the Buddha and his achievement, we're not relying on faith per se. We are relying on confidence because somebody has done this, somebody has shown and shared that it's doable, just like in research. The same thing applies to us. Now, to make it a little more, uh, helpful, okay, how can we make this better? Now that's where I want to share some tips. In Buddhism, we see, we talk about many forms of problem in the world, and Buddha summarized that as the dukkha. And I think there are about 300 types of mental disorders and 13,000 types of other physical disorders. That's all summarized into dissatisfaction and dukkha, because there is something that people experience which is not near and dear to them. And that's why we need the Buddha's teaching to remind us, life continues whether you like it or not. And when you can reflect on those situations, we should be able to overcome. Now, how do we make that happen? So here's the takeaway. How do we make this happen? And what I've been trying to tell you is, if you compare the Buddha's approach and in any science, not just psychology, science approach, it's very close to humans. It does not have any type of superficial belief, or we need to have blind faith on anyone. We just need to give it a try. And that's the invitation in the Dhammagata. When you start saying, Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Sanditiko Kaliko, Ehipasiko, you come and see, come and observe yourself. And if it is useful to you, you can try. So when invites you, how can we make this better? And I'll tell you one simple, the lesson from the Buddha. He talked about effort, and it's nothing is easy. Life is not easy. And my grandfather, my mom's dad, he used to lecture us, especially when we were young. If you waste a grain of rice, he used to lecture us how long does it take to have one grain of rice. And it's a very long, tedious lecture. All the steps, because he was a farmer, so he would tell you all the steps from taking the seed to planting to harvesting to turning to a rice and put it in your plate. So the point is, nothing is easy in life. That's why we need this effort. We need to have some effort so we can make it happen. And now effort can come in many forms. From the Buddha's teaching, we see that effort can be seen as one form of effort could be if you are trying something new. Let's say you're trying to listen to one Dhamma talk. You're trying to sit down for 1 minute and practice meditation. You're trying to practice loving kindness for a few minutes. You're trying to be generous, trying to share. Any of those, you're trying to shake off a bad habit. Any of them requires some level of effort. It doesn't happen in vacuum. It doesn't happen automatically. So the number one is you have to try to not develop any bad habit, or in Pali we call akusala, or unwholesome behaviors or thoughts. Try your best to not to develop a new unwholesome behaviors, bad habits. Just keep it that way. Bad habits. That's number one. We need effort on that part. And the second part of the effort is try your best to remove or get rid of the bad habit that you already have. And Buddha is telling you in these very small steps, right? Try your best to get rid of bad habit that you already have. And you have to have effort to establish a good habit that was not there yet. And that's the third one. Establish a new good habit or wholesome habits that is not already there. And try to improve the good habit that you already have established. So that's the fourth one. And when you think from the effort perspective in learning Dhamma, thinking about learning Dhamma requires some effort. And this effort is not very simple because, and one last thing I want to share before I conclude is that if you think of, um, in Buddhism we talk about the conditional arising, paticca samuppada, and most people think that the very origin of our cycle of life is because of ignorance. In Avidya Sutta in Anguttara Nikaya, Buddha talked about, well, that's not the ignorance is not free from um, any type of feeding. So something feeds, let's keep it that way. Something feeds ignorance. And Buddha explained it's the five hindrances. We have too much desire, too much anger, we're too lazy, we're too restless, or we have too much doubt. So any of these five hindrances could feed our ignorance. And then avidya paccaya sankhara, or the ignorance can condition to disposition and so on. So I'm sure if you look into it, what are these 12 folds of conditional arising? And Buddha goes a little step back. So what feeds five hindrances? Well, it's the lack of uh, uh, morality, or the other term is three forms of misconduct. Now you don't have a trained mind, trained body, and trained speech. When you don't have this trained mind, body, and speech, that can feed those five hindrances. Well, what feeds these lack of or three forms of misconduct? That could be you don't have good restraint of the senses. Your faculties are too wild. And okay, what feeds that? What feeds this lack of restraint? Then he explains lack of mindfulness, lack of alertness, sati sampadanya. You are not aware about your surrounding, and you tend to uh, uh, exploit your senses. Then what feeds the lack of mindfulness? Then he explains that inappropriate attention, or ayoniso manasikara. You're not very attentive, or you don't have this good attention. And what feeds that inattention? And he explains that you don't have strong conviction, you lack confidence in teaching. And what leads to lack of confidence? Well, you have not heard the Dhamma, you did not listen to Dhamma, you did not learn about Dhamma. And then what feeds the not having Dhamma knowledge is lack of good people in your life. So I know it's a long chain of command there you see, is that Buddha explained that we need good Dhamma friends, and these are the good platform for us to have good friends and learn about the Dhamma. And I hope that you continue to think, uh, critically. You think, have some confidence, not just the false confidence, but also thinking about the Buddha who has gone through this journey, and he wanted us to repeat it. He wanted us to replicate, just like in science, just like in psychology. And we can use this Dhamma by a little bit of effort. And once you start that journey, think of this as a one of many, many, many attempts. And I tell that, if I don't know, because I don't have that supernatural or psychic power to tell that there was a previous life. But I know one thing for sure, that is all this. My affiliation to the Dhamma has to do with many lives of practice. I should have gone through many of these practices, and I continue to show or have that same urgency to learn the Dhamma and to bring this Dhamma into our life. And I hope by listening to this, associating good people in your life, you will inspire, you will find your own reason to learn about the Dhamma and bring that into life and benefit it from in this very life, rather than waiting until certain age, certain time, certain condition. Because the best condition is now, because this is perfect opportunity for us. Whether you are in a certain age or a certain place, it's a perfect opportunity for us to learn some of those Dhamma and bring that into life, and see how we can change, how we can, as simple as be mindful of a single thought moment, be mindful before we speak, be less hurtful toward other people when we speak, or share what we have and change some of our behaviors. All of them, they are leading toward And in Buddha's term, we call um, Tamo Aloka Parayana. So we're walking from darkness to brightness. So I wish you all, good luck and continue to learn Dhamma, continue to practice the Buddha's teaching as they fit your life. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge, Mr. Sai, on the relationship between Buddhism and psychology. You
I
have,
think, Sylvia, you're still mute.
I think I'm. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I cannot hear what you're saying, Sylvia. Probably my mic is mute.
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Okay, now I can hear you too.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge on the relationship between Buddhism and psychology. You have helped me personally to understand the topic, especially by providing day-to-day examples. I'm hopeful that our Dhamma friends around the world were also benefited today. I think we have a couple questions. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. We have a couple questions from Alia. When we experience pain and dealing with illness, then we speak to Buddhist monks. They always recommend us to meditate. Has there been any studies that prove meditation can help the body heal from illness?
Well, that's a really good question. There are a lot of studies. I don't think they have studied to cure or heal your physical ailment. What meditation helps to do is it can help you not to suffer from the pain, because physical pain is inevitable. It will be there. Let's say somebody pinches you, and even you are very deeply meditating, the pain will be there. But what makes it worse is the way we associate with the pain. Let's say the pain in my arm, and I have pain, and as soon as I pay attention to pain, what goes through our mind is that I don't like this, right? I don't like this. I want to get rid of it. Now, your wish is to get rid of pain, but pain does not listen to you. It will continue to throb, it will continue to hurt, and you will experience that discomfort. Now, in addition to physical pain, what you started experiencing is suffering. Now you're suffering because your wish is not coming true. So why those monks who make reference to meditation, they did it rightfully so, because what we try to do is, now pain starts, yes, it is in physical contact, let's say any part of the body, but the suffering is in mind. Now, what mindfulness trains you to do is, instead of liking or disliking that pain, you learn to observe that as a sense experience. And when you observe, you notice it, again, it does not take away your pain. Don't get me wrong. I don't think meditation has that kind of promise. It doesn't tell that your physical pain will go away, right? But what it tells you is you will not suffer from pain. Now, the best studies that I can refer to you, Alia, is that if you look at MSRP, mindfulness-based stress reduction, this was the very first time in this modern time that Buddhism came to the United States. Zan Kabat-Zinn, who was a physician helping patients who had chronic pain due to various reasons. That they tried all kind of opioid drugs, helped them to alleviate their pain. Now, the best medication stops working, or you start developing some kind of addiction to the drug, right? The pain is numbed, or you don't feel it as long as you have medication. So, to keep it short, Kabat-Zinn, who was also who learned meditation from Buddhist monastic monks and nuns, that he start to speculate, well, can I use mindfulness to help people who are suffering from chronic pain? Chronic pain is like, I'm sure you know, the pain does not go away for months. It's not just temporary, it's always there. Medication can help you for so many hours, then it comes back. Now, what they found in studies is that people suffer more than hurt or discomforted by the physical pain. And mindfulness, they develop protocol and they have a very successful outcomes that people are able to manage their suffering and also not feel awful about their life. People could even kill themselves because it's too excruciating. So they manage their psychological application or attribution about pain and continue to living their life. And it's just like exercise. Once you practice, for so many times, it becomes a very easy habit to be mindful of them. And the other, some reference you will see if you look at the National Geographic magazine, they have an issue on stress, they have an issue on pain, and they talked about all types of medication. At the very end, they talked about, okay, what if none of those medication work? Well, that's when they turn to mindfulness. And it has been beneficial for many. Of course, it's a skill. It's not like a dose, you just swallow a pill and the pain is gone. It's a skill that you have to practice and master it to some extent and start applying. So it can take away your suffering despite all those pain that you experience. And yes, there are a lot of studies on that.
I think Alia also had another question. I have heard such terms as psychotherapy. What defines Buddhist psychotherapy, and can you provide example that we can find within our surrounding of Buddhist psychotherapy?
That's another good question, Alia. I don't know any Buddhist psychotherapists. I think the best ones are the Buddhist monks who uh, I, I I said monks and I thought of myself, but I'm not a monk anymore. But somebody who has learned Buddhism and who also has learned psychology, they can see the connection. Like myself, I see the connection, and there are so many applications. There is one book, if you are interested in uh, Buddhism and cognitive psychology. Sorry, it should be Buddhist and cognitive psychology. So that book goes on in compared to cognitive behavior therapy, one of the gold standard treatment for many psychological disorders, and try to connect how Buddhist principles, like I talked about generosity, talked about practicing morality, 5 precepts, the loving kindness. They have compassion-based therapy, ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. They incorporate mindfulness aspect of Buddhism, dialectical behavior therapy, mindfulness and cognitive behavior therapy. So many the Western ideas, they have embraced the Buddhist principles, but there are no. I don't know any like a pure practitioner who only uses Buddhism as an approach. And there are when I was in undergrad in Sri Lanka, we had a course on Buddhist psychotherapy. Um, yeah, I think Buddhist psychology or Buddhist psychotherapy, one or the other. It's been a while, and there we talked about just like what I was sharing early on. What is humans made of? And in I teach a psychotherapy introduction to psychotherapy class. There we talked about Sigmund Freud, Alfred Adler, all these guys who created these theories, and they talk about their life and they talk about how they view humans and their principles, what can help them. Now, if you think from that point of view, the Buddha's life story is the theorist. The Buddha is the theorist who started this idea, or at least promoted this idea, and how he viewed the life. To him, like we all are running after happiness, running away from unhappiness, right? And in that journey, how can we use Buddha's teaching to reduce more distress, more problem, and move toward improving rather than like being impasse or stuck in one place. So those books have some reference, and um, I'm not sure any other like a particular person I can refer to. But again, monks, if you talk to somebody who in monastery, or they will have a good connection between, like, I see that, how depression could be similar to what we in Buddhism we talk about mindlessness. You're not mindful about your current time, but you spend too much time in the past. That's basically the mechanism of depression. And same thing with anxiety. You spend too much time thinking about the future and you're not in the present, right? You're over worrying about what comes tomorrow, and that could be the signs of or symptoms of anxiety. So people who know those two fields may have somewhat better understanding. But in terms of places or people, there's a couple of references I mentioned earlier.
Okay. I don't think there's any other questions. I think we can conclude, Mr. Sai, if you don't have any other comments. Thank you again for accepting our invitation. And it's really good to see you again. I
Likewise,
personally,
yeah, thank you for having me.
yes.
Thank you,
um,
Bhakti. I
with
will see
that,
you again. Yes.
With
Have a good
that,
night.
Dhamma friends, we can conclude today's guest lecture, and we look forward to meeting you with more interesting topics like this in the coming weeks. Please contact us if you have an interesting and useful topic, and we would like to also invite you if you're interested in joining us in this weekly guest lecture series. Let's also keep our palms together close to our heart and pray that by the power of all the dana, sila, bhavana activities that we all have performed during our lifetime and during our whole course of samsara, become one united power and may it shared with all the celestial beings. May all the wonderful celestial beings, including respectful Brahmas and Devas and all sentient beings, receive this merit and share this merit and be well, happy, and healthy wherever they are. May all your departed ones also receive this merit and be well, happy, healthy, safe wherever they are. May all of us be able to live life peacefully, comfortably, and with good health. May all of us and all sentient beings be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana, the absolute peace and happiness at the end of our samsara. Thinking thus, please keep your palms together close to your heart and say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. See you guys again next week at the same time. Have a good evening.